Hi everyone, welcome back to the final episode of Bridging the Gap. Wow, after a long months of procrastination, I finally pulled together the final script and recorded it. So here we go with reductions and invasions. First, what are reductions and invasions? Well, invasions and reductions are plays made to lessen the opponent's territorial claims. On the extreme end, these plays aim purely to reduce the opponent's total score, though more commonly they also serve to expand your own territory and/or influence. Remember, Go is a game where moves often have many purposes and we're trying to be as efficient as possible. Broadly, invasions and reductions can be differentiated by their relation to sector lines, the imaginary borders demarcating players' areas of control. Consider this board. We have some examples of sector lines labeled A and B. A reduction commonly refers to plays on or right by the sector lines. Invasions can be shallow or deep, but usually refer to all those plays which happen inside a sector line. The trade-off of going deeper is that you stand to ruin more territory, but it also becomes more difficult to live or escape and not feed tons of free points to your opponent. These moves can be frustrating to play against, and conversely can be very rewarding to successfully pull off, and without a doubt lead to some of the most exciting games. They are not to be thrown around carelessly, but are still some of the most fundamental tools to have in your Go tool belt. Next, when should I reduce or invade? Well, reductions and invasions are high-risk moves, and thus it's appropriate to properly assess the pros and cons of such before playing. If there are other moves which can make a greater or similar point swing for less risk, those moves ought to be exhausted first. Remember, efficiency is the name of the game. Successfully invading does not win the game, only having more points does. That being said, here's a quick checklist to see if it's appropriate to make an invasion or reduction. First, is something dying or at risk of being in a dire situation? If your troops stand to be bullied or you can bully an opponent's group, these take priority. Remember, urgent before big. Second, are there large unclaimed areas of the board? If so, it is unadvisable to squabble over 10 or 20 points when you have entire chunks of the board that remain unplayed. A wise opponent might abandon the battles entirely and win the war by simply playing elsewhere. 3. Am I behind or is it necessary to reduce or invade? If I can safely win the game by solidifying my own position, this is the proper move. There's no need to risk throwing the match for no reason. And 4, finally, if you've determined that the other plays are not proper, then you should consider how deeply to reduce or invade. If you are very behind, you should play a riskier move. However, if you're only a little behind or seek to upset an even situation, a shallow reduction might be plenty. So let's talk about reductions. Reductions are relatively safe moves as they don't go too deep into the opponent's influence. However, the wrong moves could still leave you in a worse position at the end. Here's an example of a simple reduction. By playing at A, Black is able to check the opponent's expanding border while still maintaining easy access to an established position. Comparatively, a move at B is difficult to make safe. That doesn't mean B is a bad move per se, but other factors being equal, on this board, a move at A should be safer, easier, and thus your first pick. Contact moves are also common reducing moves. Moves like shoulder hits and attachments strongly encourage local response and can be used to quickly establish a flexible position. However, remember that starting a fight could leave you in a worse position. Don't be afraid to experiment, but also don't recklessly engage. Have a plan, follow through, remember to read during your games, and learn from it in review whether or not it works, why, and what you could have done differently. Now, compared to reductions, invasions are riskier, and so one should be more careful in making an invading play. A good rule of thumb is to have at least 2 escape routes planned, with 3 or more being optimal. The most basic plan for getting an invasion out to safety is to throw a stone in and then jump out towards the center. Another common idea is to threaten a connection underneath. Remember, your opponent gets a move after you, so you have to think about a backup plan if your first idea is countered. For example, on this board, if Black invades on this as such, how would you play if White prevented your access to the center with a cap? Even if you manage to live inside, White might just get a thick outer influence and use that to recoup their losses elsewhere. Remember to think just beyond the one move and the one situation. Contact moves can also be useful invading, but again, these carry some additional risk. Even more so because a bad result inside opponent influence might feed a whole bunch of points and just end the game right there. Now, there are common sequences for both invasions and reductions, which I will link resources later, but having some basic plan is usually enough to improve at beginner levels. Specific tactics can be learned on the way. To close, invasions and reductions are powerful moves whose outcomes often determine who wins. Be mindful of when you deploy these strategies and always have a plan for what to do with them. Some good resources include Nick Sibicky's lecture on invasions, dwyrin's basic videos which specifically focus on invasions and reductions, and for more advanced players, Fujisawa Shuko's Reducing Territorial Frameworks is an invaluable dictionary of common patterns. Links as always in the description. So that's all for the series. I plan to do a final Q&A video covering some questions people have put in the comments, which I've unintentionally ignored over the past few months. So if you have anything you want to ask, please throw it down in the comment section and I'll try to include it in my final video. I hope this series has been helpful and has equipped you with the tools and terminology to tackle some of the more advanced videos. If there are other topics you'd like to see covered, please let me know because I'm pretty much out of Go video ideas. And yeah, that's it. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed Bridging the Gap.